Golden Dust class 213. The last class was a little difficult, I admit, because you really had to be familiar with the stories of Jorge Luis Borges, which not everybody is, and I totally got it. Um, you know, um, but there was a lot of chokhmah bagoyim ta'amen. There was a lot of chokhmah in those stories, and it touched upon matters that are important to us as Jews, right? Because every Jew should be very concerned about text and what is a text, what is language, what are words, right? So these stories in Borges, they touch upon those matters, and we need to be thinking about these things, right? But anyway, now we're going to back to rabbinic literature. So page 127. The rabbis too concede that the human mind is a kind of mirror, right? So Jorge Luis Borges, I wouldn't be surprised if he was familiar with some rabbinic literature. He brings a lot of Jewish symbols and motifs in his stories. But anyway, so we Chachamim concede that the mind is a mirror. In order to explain to a Samaritan how God could have revealed himself to Moses in the narrow area between the two staves of the Holy Ark, Rabbi Meir said, and this is now a quote from Bereshit Rabbah. So again, the question is, if how can God reveal himself between the staves of the ark? So Rabbi Meir says, bring me a large mirror. He brought him one. He told him, look at your reflection. He saw it large. Well, it's a large mirror. Bring me a small mirror. He brought him one. He told him, look at your reflection. He saw it small. He said to him, if you who are of flesh and blood can change yourself as you wish, the creator of the universe, how much more so? Meaning, God can reflect upon the mirrors of our minds. Not every mirror, because some people are just not worthy, or some people are not, at the level to get anything. But there's something that the Nevi'im can get, right? As noted by Rabbi Yosef Tzorfati, Rabbi Meir intended to demonstrate how God's presence and reflection vary according to the mind of the individual, just as images will vary depending on the kind of the mirror in which they are reflected. That's why different Nevi'im, they experience the Shekhinah differently, because the mirror of the mirror that, let's say, Yehezkel is different than the mirror of Yeshaya. So when Yehezkel sees the Merkavah, it's something terrifying and almost frightening, and Yeshaya is very, calm, and there's almost a sublime aspect to Yeshaya's vision of the Merkavah, right? Yeah. Interestingly, our speculation in its reflective and conjectural sense is related to the Latin speculum, looking glass mirror. So when you speculate, you're using your mind to consider something. So something is being reflected in your mind, and you're mulling over that reflection. So speculation related to speculum, which means looking glass. The same term appears as a loan word in rabbinic literature in the form speklaria, with the meaning looking glass, mirror. So there were Nevi'im who saw bespeklaria she'ena me'ira. So when the Nevi'im saw something, it was with a mirror, but the mirror wasn't a shiny, well-polished mirror. So the image wasn't quite precise and clear. There was some doubt, there was some ambiguity, and there's different levels of speklaria she'ena me'ira. You see speklaria, mirror. So the mind of the Navi is a speklaria. It is significant that the rabbis use this term to explain the difference between the prophetic vision of Moses and that of all other prophets. Moses beheld the divine presence from a brilliant speklaria me'ira, whereas all other prophets beheld it in the form of a speklaria she'ena me'ira. This is Masechet Yevamot, Daf Mem Tet Amud Bet, right? Mem Tet Amud Bet in Masechet Yevamot. Yeah, okay. In a different passage, two traditions are registered concerning the meaning of a brilliant and not brilliant specularia. The rabbis maintain that brilliant means a well-polished mirror, right? So it's well-polished mirror, good optics to the mirror, right? Whereas not brilliant is a stained mirror. So obviously a stained mirror will not reflect as sharply as a well-polished mirror. However, Rabbi Yehuda bar Ilai maintained that whereas other prophets beheld the divine presence reflected in the ninth mirror, Moses beheld it reflected in the first mirror. So you imagine you have a mirror. So one mirror, and it reflects an image. So you see the image clearly on the mirror. But if one mirror reflects another mirror, and then the other mirror reflects the other mirror, and then the other mirror reflects the other mirror, you can see how there can be some distortion. So the mirror of the Nevi'im, the regular Nevi'im, as opposed to Moshe Rabbeinu, was the ninth mirror. Moses beheld it reflected in the first mirror, right? So that's the difference between Moshe Rabbeinu and She'ar HaNevi'im. That's in Vayikra Rabbah. That's a little different than Masechet Yevamot of Mem Tet. Ha'ayeh Gaon remarked that the brilliance of the divine presence is a piercing radiation, somehow reminiscent of the iridescent sphere of almost unbrilliance of Borges's Aleph, which, if directly perceived, will result in instant death. Let's talk about Borges's Aleph. So this story was written in 1945, and it deals with the theme of perceiving the infinite and the limits of human understanding. So the Aleph, and I mentioned before that the Aleph, that Borges has Jewish symbols. So here you see the Jewish symbol, right? So anyway, so supposedly in the basement of some house, there was a small iridescent sphere. And if you look at that small sphere, and that small sphere is called the Aleph, you can see the entire universe from every angle and from every perspective in one shot, right? Simultaneously. Now, this, of course, would result in death because the experience of perceiving all of reality at once from every single perspective is something beyond human capacity, right? So the human brain is not designed to process the infinite, right? So that if the human brain transcends or tries to transcend the boundary of what it can and can't perceive, then it's going to be catastrophic. Now, this is somehow related to the divine, of course, because when we're talking about perceiving the divine is something beyond human comprehension. It's an absolute truth, which is beyond anything that our brains can possibly process, right? So now you know why Lo Yir'ani Ha'adam B'chai. So this is Borges's brilliant interpretation of Lo Yir'ani Ha'adam B'chai, because Aleph, of course, refers to Aluf, which is a leader, the Aleph, which is God, right? So that's the point. So Rav Ayegon did not read Borges, right? But he says that the brilliance of the divine presence is a piercing radiation, somehow reminiscent, says my father, of the iridescent sphere of almost unbearable brilliance of Borges's Aleph, which if directly perceived will result in instant death. Rabbeinu Hananel further elaborated this point. All the prophets who perceived his glory from a speklaria, she'ena me'ira, perceived it as a dim light. right? So they saw the Shekhinah, but they saw it in a very dim way because the mirrors are dim, not because the Shekhinah is dim. They imagine that they have perceived a vision as when an elderly person whose eyesight is weak sees that which is short as if it were tall, and one as if it were two, and as in other such cases, although this is not so in reality. So that what you perceive in your mirror is not a copy paste of absolute reality, right? What you perceive is what you can perceive. Right. We'll stop here.